Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layout, and today I pulled out my Simple Stories for the Record, as well as this sketchbook from Scrapbook Generation. It is 22-page sketches that has a ton of photos on the sketch. For the month of February, I really wanted to focus on the flowers from the collection. I don't tend to scrapbook with a lot of flowers because I don't tend to scrapbook a lot of girl layouts. When I looked through that sketchbook, I found sketch number 10, which is a sketch that has a ton of circles at the bottom, and I thought that I could replace those circles with the florals from the collection. The sketch basically calls for the photos at the top third of the layout, and then the bottom third of the layout is where all of the embellishments are going to be. The sketch actually calls for a wall-to-wall photos, and the photos are really small, some of them being as small as 2x2, and that didn't really work for me. So what I decided to do was just take that space and figure out how I can work my photos into that space. I definitely wanted to have 3x4 and 4x4 photos, as well as a couple of 4x6 photos. I was able to get 11 photos on this layout, and then I have embellishments all around. I first started by adding these 3 photos on the left-hand side, but when I got the photo on the right down, it didn't line up, and instead of cutting down my layout, I decided to start over and basically start on the edge with that Disney photo. So by adding that photo to the edge, then I could add my 2 photos next to it, making sure that they lined up properly, of course using my T-square ruler. And then I do have a little bit of space over on the left-hand side, and I'm going to show you how I end up embellishing that area as well. And then I start to work on the right-hand side. I'm going to have the same configuration of 2 3x4s and a 4x4. So I have equal space on the left and right. For the second row, I'm going to add 2 3x4s as well as a 4x6. And then for the right-hand side, I'm going to have a 4x6 and a 4x4. So on the right-hand side of the layout, I'm going to have an entire area that's about 2 inches. On the left-hand side, I'm going to have just the top corner area that I'm going to be able to put some embellishments on. I first wanted to start out with the embellishment piece that I want to make sure that I'm including on all of my layouts. And that is the embellishment cluster that's already been created with the calendar that has the month on it, so February for this month, and then also the number 2. If you remember last month, I forgot about it completely and I had to figure out a way to get it added way later on. So I made sure to pull it out very early and get it on my layout so that I didn't have that same struggle. I then used the number 2 to cover up that area where you're supposed to put the year, because it has 20 and then the line where you can write in the year, but I don't really like that, so I covered it up with the number 2. My thought for the right-hand side was to pull out these tags and add them to the right-hand side of the layout. My thought was that I would cut out several of them and use them to embellish the entire right-hand side of the layout. These tags have 2 sides. One side is decorative, and then the other side has like the tag topper and then a white area on the bottom. I was trying to look through the tags to use the ones that I didn't think that I would use on the decorative side, but I did find this one floral that I really liked, and I knew that I was going to have florals at the bottom, so I thought maybe I could use that. So I have 3 tags that just have the tag toppers and the white part, and then I have that one tag with the florals. I did pull out my Distress ink in an orange because I knew that I wanted to have orange be the predominant color for this particular layout. The number 2 on the left-hand side is in orange, and I knew some of the florals that I was going to be using was going to also be in orange. So I made sure that the tags that I was using as well had a lot of the orange in it. I also pulled in the tag that has the green and the blue, since I was going to have some of the green in the florals as well. I used the very precise technique of my fingernail to measure how long I wanted these tags. I did have to use my spatula to pull up some of the photos because I did put adhesive all the way down and I wanted to tuck the tags in. So I'm going to repeat that process for each one of these tags by inking up the edges, using my fingernail to mark how much I need to cut off, and then tucking them underneath the photos. I started with the top and the bottom one, and then filled in the centers with the green one. And then I really struggled with the floral one. I wanted to use the floral, but then I put it down on the tag with the orange side up. So I removed the adhesive and put it on the other side, adding the tag back down, but I just wasn't liking it. I think that it was standing out because the other 3 tags had that white bottom to it, and this one was a solid piece. So I decided to just go with the orange tag. That last photo wasn't straight, so I did have to pull it up and add it back down. I did tuck it underneath the 4x6 photo a little bit because it was a little bit larger than the photo that was on top of it. I then pulled out my jute twine and added some twine to each one of the tags. Because the tags go so close to the edge, I do end up cutting off a lot of the jute twine. I wish I was able to have longer pieces of the jute twine, but I think that it looks okay. I'm then going to add a striped pattern to the bottom of the photos. The sketch does call for 2 border strips down there, so I'm going to do the stripe and then also the orange. This is going to give it some separation from the photos and the huge embellishment clusters that I'm going to create at the bottom. And once I get all of the florals down, I'm really going to like the way that this stripe and orange look behind all of the embellishment clusters. So as I'm getting that paper down, let me just talk a little bit about a couple of the photos. The photo on the very far left-hand side is when I first started using my journal strips to document my journaling. I have a tutorial on the journal strips, and I will link it here for you guys. I can't believe it's been almost a year since I've been doing my journaling this way. The next 2 photos are the screenshot of renewing my Disney Pass, and then the photo next to it is just a screenshot that I happened to post on Facebook when I did renew my pass. It says, "In a world where you can be anything, be a weird Disney person." And since I have been a pass holder for 6 years now, I definitely define myself as that weird Disney person. The 2 4x6 photos of Eli with the dark side car as well as the Pokemon card. He was actually out with his friend Levi, and his mom took those 2 pictures, so I don't have anything else from there, so I thought I would just add it to my month in review. And then I'm going to start with these florals. After putting all of my embellishments on page protectors, I had a full sheet of florals, and I was really fearful that I wasn't going to be able to use all of them. I was able to put a huge dent in those florals with this layout, and I'm super excited about that. So I just started out with that really large floral on the left-hand side. I definitely wanted to mix a couple of other pieces so it just wasn't floral. I found this one ticket that had some orange florals to the right of it, so I added that, and then I'm just really starting to build up the cluster, adding as many of the florals and pieces that have florals in it. I really wanted to use that typewriter that had the florals, but it was just too large and it didn't fit very well. The sketch calls for a bunch of circles to take up the entire left-hand side of the layout and spill a little bit into the right-hand side of the layout, and then there's some space underneath it, and then the florals are contained over in the far right-hand side. So I'm using the sketch as inspiration on how to add these flowers. I don't feel like I'm really good at clusters, especially these really large clusters, but I do think that I was able to get a good balance of the large florals as well as the smaller florals. Once I got a configuration that I thought worked well, I decided to go ahead and ink up all of the edges just to give it a little bit of extraness to each one of the clusters. I do plan on stitching on some of these. When I first started out, I thought I would just add a little bit of stitching, but you guys know that I tend to go a little bit crazy with my stitching. I actually posted in my Facebook group the floral that's on the very far left-hand side. When I started to poke those holes, I didn't realize how many holes I was going to need for that floral, and it just took on a mind of its own. So as I'm getting the rest of the florals down, let's talk about some more photos. On the right-hand side of the layout, I have a picture from a screenshot of the Silhouette store. I actually ended up upgrading my Silhouette. I had the original Cameo. I upgraded to the Silhouette Cameo 4. I did buy it refurbished, and it was in the clearance section, so I was able to get a really good deal on it. We also had World Tour in February. That is something that Scentsy does in the springtime to show us the new catalog. In February of last year, and really the entire first 6 months of 2024, I was trying to get my watch hours back to where I wanted them to be on YouTube so that I could monetize my account again. Basically, every week I was taking screenshots and comparing my watch hours to see how many public watch hours I was getting. And I was roughly getting anywhere from 50 to 75 watch hours per week, which I thought was pretty good. Once I got all of the florals down, I realized that I needed to connect my tags to the floral on the bottom. It just looked like there was this harsh cut with that striped paper and the orange. So I decided to add this tag that says every day, and it has some leaves and florals on it. And then I also added another floral cluster right above it. And because it's touching the tags as well as the floral that's on the bottom, I felt like that cluster was finally complete. And then I started to poke my holes so that I could stitch. I actually saved one compartment in my thread box so that I could have all of the threads that I used in the last layout and have them available to me for the entire year. So I pulled out those threads first because I knew that they would match the collection. And then I pulled out my stitching tools to include my needles, magnetic box, as well as my threaders. And those are all linked below in my Amazon storefront if you would like to check them out. I did slow the video down here so that you can see this amazing stitching detail. I added stitching to so many of these embellishments. I actually took this layout to a local croc that I attend and was able to get a majority of it done there. I then pulled out this sticker sheet, which I'm using for my titles of each month. So I pulled out the February. I'm also still trying to get rid of all of those tiny little fun foam pieces. So I added that to the back of this sticker, and I'm going to add it right above my florals on the left-hand side. And then I'm going to pull out the sticker sheet, and I thought that I could use some of these flat stickers to fill in the area over on the right-hand side. So I turned my layout on its side because I really wanted to make sure that I was covering up a lot of that white area with a bunch of the different embellishments. And honestly, if it matched the color scheme of what was going on with this layout, as well as having the florals, that's the only thing that I was looking at. I pulled in several florals that I cut in half so that I could use it in multiple places. And I feel like the addition of these flat stickers really makes that area pop. I also decided to add this word sticker over on the left that says memorable. And then there's a lot of office supplies in this collection. And so I'm just using them randomly throughout my layout. I don't feel like it makes a whole lot of sense, but it's going on here. It matches. Whoever designed this collection had some sort of idea that it would all go together, and I feel like it does. Even with this layout that has predominantly florals on it, when I add the paper clips and binder clips, it doesn't look out of place. So I'm just going with it. I also decided to pull out the adhesive brads, and I added those throughout the layout as well. I'm going to use the same technique that I used last month to date my photos. I have this die that I will link below. It's the friendship die. It's able to cut out circles and squares. And I also have a stamp that I can link below for you as well that fits perfectly on these little tiny circles. So you can see that I wrote the date on a scrap piece of paper up in the upper right hand corner. And then I'm just using that stamp to stamp those dates on these little tiny circles. I tend to usually mess up a first couple of them, but it's okay because I'm going to stack these 3 high. So the top layer will be the layer that I have stamped on, and then the bottom 2 layers are just going to be plain white. So the 2 that I messed up on, I just put them over on my silhouette mat, and I'm just going to stack on top of them. Because these pieces are so tiny, I do have to use my poker tool to get them off of the stamp, but it just becomes an assembly line of getting them stamped on the circles. Once I get all of the dates stamped, I will add some liquid adhesive to the circles that are on my silhouette mat, and then add a second blank circle on top of it, and then add the dated circle on top of that. So this gives the circles a little bit of depth, and so when they are adhered to the photos, it makes them stand out a little bit. Once I get them all adhered together, then I'm going to use some liquid adhesive to adhere them to my layout. And as I'm doing that, let me just wrap up my photos. Over on the far left-hand side, I was in the middle of binge watching Good Trouble, which is a fabulous show. It's a spinoff from The Fosters. So I was just enjoying a glass of wine and watching my show. The photo next to it is my very first set of AirPods, and I found this really cool case to hold it that has a camera. And then over on the far right-hand side is actually a post from Facebook. On that particular day, I had been called formidable, and so I posted on Facebook, the verdict is still out on whether being described as formidable is a compliment or a complaint. But it definitely made for an interesting day at work, which I thought was something that I definitely wanted to remember in the future. So I decided to add it to my month in review. And then I pulled out my dies to cut out 2024, and I'm still using those 3x4 cards to get some solid paper. I thought about using the green, but I did not have enough space for it. So I went back to the navy. I was able to get a couple of numbers on the September card, and then I did have to pull out another card to get the last number. I then cut out the 2024 in the white cardstock. I'm using Nicole's Dicker technique for these numbers as well. And it's just basically adding the 2 white cardstocks on the bottom and then the patterned cardstock on top. I did decide to use a little bit of the navy inking just to tone down the harshness of the white cardstock in the back. I really wanted to add the 2024 to that tag on the right hand side, but it was way too big. So I just snuggled it in between the February and the tag that says memorable. And just using some liquid adhesive and my tweezers to make sure I get all of those numbers down. I went back to the sticker book and thought that I could add a few more stickers over on the far right hand side. I'm still trying to use that mentality that I am gathering from the Creating with Collection series of more is more. I do not want a lot of this collection left after I am done with these layouts. So I am trying my hardest to just keep adding more is more. I also pulled out my Tim Holtz Tiny Attacher because that was something else that I wanted to make sure that I included on each one of the layouts for this year. I did have to add some liquid adhesive to the backs of those tags because they were sticking up just a little bit. And then that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. I did do my journaling offline and I added it over to the right-hand side of the layout. If you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.